Welcome to Thuringia International School in Weimar, Germany. It's my privilege to work here with the students, the staff and faculty, the parents and others who comprise our learning community as school director. Our school has about 300 students from age 4 through to age 18. It's a small community that's well integrated into local culture and also able to respond to the individual needs of those from diverse backgrounds and learning needs. Most of our students move on to university after graduating here, primarily in Europe, sometimes in the US or elsewhere in the world. We use well-established international educational programs in school, including those of the International Baccalaureate Organization, the IB, which values students becoming not only knowledgeable in some of the standard knowledge domains and about the world in general, but also critical thinkers able to investigate the nature of knowledge itself. At this time of year, our lower school students work towards presenting an exhibition of their achievement by way of an extended in-depth project, which is always a collaborative inquiry into a topical issue or global problem. They've just finished their presentations. The children's parents were delighted with what the students were able to achieve, not only in terms of demonstrating knowledge and understanding, but also in terms of their confidence and autonomy. Furthermore, it provided a meaningful and authentic process for teachers to assess a broad range of achievement and development. Our upper school students are taking exams at the moment. They work towards the IB diploma, which also couples the acquisition of knowledge with a broad range of learning outcomes, including the metacognitive skills required for a positive approach to learning and self-development. Students have undertaken an independent, self-directed piece of research culminating in an extended essay, and they've participated in a range of activities alongside their academic studies, able to provide the means to take action in the service of others. Students in the diploma programme have also looked at how knowledge is constructed using the different ways of knowing, and by considering what constitutes knowledge in various areas of learning. As a school, we want students not only to understand the associated knowledge content in each of these domains, but also to critique autonomously and collaboratively the context, and accordingly the validity of that knowledge. For instance, if a historical narrative says a particular event happened, and contextual analysis says that this event has meaning to society, then what is this process of attributing meaning to events? If the classical Weimar period is said to have had great meaning to German culture during the past 200 years or so, then what does it mean for something to have cultural meaning? Here's another example. If mathematical knowledge says the square root of 4 is plus or minus 2 is always true, and it's true because of axiomatic foundations, then what is axiomatic knowledge? And why is it always true? Or, if scientific knowledge says a particular fact or condition is true, such as that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, assuming one atmosphere and a certain degree of water purity, in what way are we able to justify that truth? Is it enough to demonstrate empirically in the lab that water boils at 100 degrees? We want students to have ownership of their own learning to the extent they're not only experts in different domains of knowledge, but also able to critique these domains and compare them with each other. The school and the IB believe that by taking this approach, students will be able to become independent learners and thinkers, able to analyse issues from different perspectives and with different approaches, which in turn will enable them to contribute to a genuinely international world and act as a voice for positive change in that world. It's the end of the school day, and students are mostly heading home now. But in my case, I've only just begun. I'd like to look at the principles that underpin the educational approach I've described in a little more depth. These principles are often associated with a modern, progressive approach to education, although actually they're not new. For more than 100 years, educational theorists have been proposing these kind of programs. And I'll look at the work of Rudolf Steiner, who lived in Weimar, and Jean Piaget in a forthcoming episode. But for now, I'd like to mention the work of one figure in particular, somebody who might be regarded as one of the grandfathers of these learning principles. The American John Dewey, who wrote his doctoral dissertation, now lost, on the psychology of Kant, and who I recently discovered lived in China for 2 years, like me, was particularly interested in good teaching and learning in schools. He argued that students thrive in an environment where they can experience and interact with learning. Learning is not something that is done to students. All students must have the opportunity to participate in their own learning. The objective of learning does not revolve merely around the acquisition of a preset list of skills, but instead around the ability to use those skills in a wider context and for the greater good.
Dewey said in 1910, "To maintain the state of doubt and to carry on systematic and protracted inquiry, these are the essentials of thinking." What better guide could there be for this, the Iphigenia Inquiry? What is the role of the teacher then? Dewey said, his or her task is rather to keep alive the sacred spark of wonder and to fan the flame that already glows. His or her problem is to protect the spirit of inquiry and to keep it from becoming blasé from overexcitement, wooden from routine, fossilised through dogmatic instruction, or dissipated by random exercise upon trivial things.
The cognitive development of students, however achieved, is not the only form of learning we value in our school. As I've alluded, we also want this learning to lead to purposeful action. We want students to be able to use knowledge in a way that makes a positive impact upon the world. The IB mission statement states that the International Baccalaureate aims to develop inquiring, knowledgeable and caring young people who help to create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect.
Consequently, our school seeks to develop a culture of integrity and honesty. We want students to become principled and empathetic in their attitude towards others. Our world has many problems and difficulties, and, as Goethe repeated often in his era, we need a collaborative culture based on understanding of and compassion for others, capable of reconciliation with others and with the environment. Our students here participate in community service projects both inside and outside the school building according to their age, both locally and globally. And of course, when they're older, they investigate the social meaning of altruism and of helping others.
This commitment to questioning and analysis is also part of the original reason for my organising this inquiry, although things have grown beyond the original intent.
And what is my inquiry here? Well, if our school wants to implement the particular model of learning culture that I described, then it's important to be able to justify it. How can we know for certain that an approach to education based on the spirit of inquiry provides the optimum learning context for our students? Is this belief based merely on anecdotes and convention? Is it merely a politically expedient choice? Or can we justify it in more credible terms?
Perhaps as a first step, the question needs to be asked, what is knowledge acquisition? Perhaps I also need to ask, what is the meaning of knowledge and what is the meaning of meaning? These are big questions and potentially involve many considerations, not only pedagogical but also psychological and epistemological and even metaphysical. But for now I'd like to look at just one of the principles underpinning our programme, the focus that we place on student collaboration.
Students receive clear and explicit guidance in class from teachers, but within the curriculum framework are learning to work both autonomously and collaboratively with others in pursuit of learning. Rather than creating classrooms where learning might be characterised as knowledge being passed in a linear manner from one person to another, from the teacher to the student, a more dynamic system is envisioned, whereby the teaching strategies and the learning environment do not possess efficacy in themselves, but are the context in which learning occurs. Learning takes place to a significant degree as a result of interactions with others.
The social aspect of this is oriented around how collaboration in learning facilitates individuals within groups and groups within larger groups assisting one another in knowledge acquisition and motivating and inspiring each other. It could be said that the school's educational approach looks to the principles of both Constructivism, which is the opposite of traditional deficit learning, whereby deficiencies are identified in students' learning pertaining to a certain task and an attempt made to fill the gaps, and social constructivism. Having said that, I'm very aware that such terms are ambiguous and commonly used today as a political football by all kinds of partisan positions. Ian Hacking commented that the metaphor of social construction once had excellent shock value, but now it's become tired.
This makes it even more important to find ways to justify the approach I've described, and in doing so to look more carefully at issues pertaining to social epistemology, which postulates that social dynamics are an integrated part of the process of acquiring and sharing knowledge.
Many writers have looked at the importance of social factors. Alex Honneth, for example, picked up on the emphasis made by Hegel, another local historical figure whose work I'll look at later, on the importance of social relationships to the development of each individual's identity.
He says the development of self-respect and self-confidence is dependent on the development of an autonomous sense of identity. He believes that human well-being requires the development of positive ethical relationships throughout society, which are established through the process of all individuals achieving recognition from and a sense of identity within society. Helen Longino at Stanford University has looked at this issue in the context of science research communities. She's developed ideas of how scientific objectivity is not necessarily compromised by the acknowledgement that research is carried out in a social setting and that its theories are the products of social groups. Her work reveals, in her words, how social values play a role in scientific research. She argues that research communities are actually less biased and more effective when they act as open environments that, as a matter of course, welcome and respond to new or alternative ideas, and that are not compromised by overbearing authority structures, as is the case in more expository learning environments.
I recognise that the very notion of extrapolating a sociology of education and learning into a sociology of science might seem, on the surface, to undermine the would-be neutrality of science and of a science epistemic.
Longino says a lot about this issue in far more depth than I can here. Suffice to say, she examines how and why maintaining a sociological context for knowledge might seem to undermine the common sense notion that a fact is a fact, unrelated to anything else. This deserves a closer look later, but for now it's enough to point out that this brings me back to the notion of idealism that I presented in the last episode. There are different types of epistemics, and I'll look at some of the differences and implications of these differences later. Certainly the Weimar tradition has no difficulties in fusing notions of knowledge and knowledge culture. For the present, I want to emphasise that outside of the relatively sheltered school environment, a great deal of contemporary research or technological development is collaborative and produces results authored by more than one individual. Facilities such as CERN, the European Organisation for Nuclear Research, or the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO, that recently detected gravitational waves, require huge teams contributing different expertise to their projects. This collaboration creates the conditions for collegiality and trust, and the ability to achieve things greater than the resources and skills of any one individual. In these cases, the development of knowledge might be said to have an emergent property, something that develops out of the social interactions and the sense of team cohesion. This is the effect we're looking for in school, whereby the learning of individual children is enhanced through their interactions with their peers and teachers through collaborative work. And as regards my inquiry, in the same way that I need to justify a social constructivist approach to pedagogy, I also need to justify the principle of commitment to others. How should we respond to arguments that suggest altruism can never be genuine, that it's merely a form of self-aggrandizement, or merely an evolutionary trait able to support natural fitness? How do I justify the integrity of community service, and thereafter, how do I justify the justification? How can we explain anything we do in school? This is at the heart of my inquiry. I hope you'll join me for the next episode, when I'll turn my attention for the third part of my introduction to aesthetic knowledge and the meaning of music. Thanks for listening.